the last day of the last dialogue. Unlike Ted, I don't think I'll get emotional until after I've recovered from the energy expenditure of this event. But thank you again, all of you, for being here. It's been a pleasure to talk about what this event means in the world in several different contexts. As Rachel Loudon reminded us yesterday, I think it's easy for those of us in think tank world to engage in, as she put it, sort of lines on the graph thinking. And it's very worthwhile to see, for instance, Jesse's graph about decarbonization, which is so central of a sort of cognitive object for eco-modernists in understanding how humans mediate their relationship to nature through technology. But it was, in many ways, Ruth DeFries' work that reminded me of the corporeal and the material, and even in the ecological and the vibrant sort of conceptuality of eco-modernism, not just through her sort of deep historical work on agricultural systems, but her field work. So it is a pleasure, for the first time in a long time, to welcome Ruth DeFries back to the stage.
Hey, good morning. My goodness. The last day of the last dialogue, that is profound. I haven't been to all of these dialogues. I have been to quite a few, and I can say that they are always unique, inspiring, challenging, a space to get out of my comfort zone, which is wonderful, and a space to get out of groupthink, or maybe at least to hear about another groupthink. So really, really thank you. Sincere thank you to Alex, Ted, everyone at Breakthrough. It's been wonderful. But as wonderful as it has been, I have to say that this association with Breakthrough has cost me with my environmentalist friends and colleagues. So thank you, Ted. I have taken quite a bit of flack for signing the Eco-Modernist Manifesto. I've been accused of being an optimist, horrible. Accused of being Pollyanna, accused of being a techno-fixer, accused of wanting to shove everyone into miserable nature-free cities and trying to feed them food from a vat. Been accused of all kinds of things, and I'm sure many of you have also been accused of these things. A lot of these criticisms are really easy to dismiss. Part of this criticism comes from the delight of having a straw man to defend old school environmentalism and old school conservation thinking. Part of the criticism is lack of understanding about what decoupling means, or reading their own definition into decoupling. Part of it is falling back on the romanticism of some pristine nature and some glorifying a past that never really existed. So quite a lot of this is easy to dismiss. But is there some crumb of criticism that is worth exploring? And this is in the interest of the conversation we were having yesterday about eco-modernism being ever evolving and a process of learning. So what I think might be worth exploring here, and I'm sure everyone has their idea of what's worth exploring, is this kind of obsession with scaling. You hear it everywhere. This blind acceptance that solutions that are scalable are good, and if they're not scalable, they're just not worth the investment. So I would like to say here that in the next thinking about where eco-modernism goes, that we think about more nuance in that sort of meeting place between top-down sorts of thinking and solutions and bottom-up. And we were getting there yesterday in some of the conversations. Let's see what I have here. So I think it was at one of these dialogues, or maybe it was somewhere else, I don't really remember, where someone showed this really cool artwork, tidying up art. And this is the depiction, or in this artist's eyes, this depiction of complex systems. And it is meant to convey the danger of reductionism. So the point is that the whole system, this picture of the bowl, emerges from the interacting pieces. The pieces on their own, when you stack them up, they're only shapes and colors. They're meaningless. But assembled together, as they interact, they become this picture of a bowl. So reducing the picture to individual pieces makes it lose its meaning. Bringing them together in their interacting parts makes a whole complex system. So, what does that mean? Is that me?
No, that's me.
Okay, that's okay. So this is really cool, but is it analogous to the real world? We might like to think it is, but it isn't really, because in this conception, the artist has an image of what that bowl should look like when this complex system is assembled. So if you think of the bowl as an energy system, food system, city, community, any of the many complex systems that create these wicked problems in the world, those systems emerge over time. They emerge from the physical inputs, the politics, the power structures, the elite captures, the vested interests, the change in the physical inputs. So even if we start with a conception of what that system should, quote, should look like, it will inevitably end up differently after all the feedbacks and nonlinearities, all these processes that take place in complex systems. So even Covelo Point, this very wonderful place, was originally conceived as a Navy base. Probably nobody at that time thought it would be a wonderful, beautiful, high-end resort where we can have these fabulous meetings. So complex systems evolve, unpredictable, they cannot be planned. So at this point, I was planning to do this. I don't know if this is a good idea. Shameless promotion of this book. There are a couple of copies in the back. You are welcome to it. And the idea of this book is, what do we learn from nature about how systems, complex adaptive systems, survive and persist over time? And I won't go into detail, but all I'll say is that we all might think we're very clever. We are very clever. People in this room are especially clever. Everybody's above average. But really, we are not nearly as clever as evolution, which has a couple of 100 million years of experience of persisting through shocks and all kinds of difficult situations. So what this book is about is the lessons that we might take from nature about how complex systems persist, thrive, and are resistant over the long term, things like redundancy and diversity and so on. But my favorite chapter is the one that's titled One Size Fits No One. And that chapter is about the damages that can come, not always, but can come from top-down solutions that are imposed on places from far away. We had a wonderful comment somewhere in this part of the room yesterday about how the further away the decision is from the place, the more likely it is to not be appropriate for the place because just don't know. Just don't know. So one example of this kind of damages that come from top-down thinking is the well-known Garrett Hardin tragedy of the commons, how that paradigm justified all sorts of inappropriate centralization, which ran over communities and very long-standing traditions of how to manage resources. And when we look at nature, we see that it never builds its systems from the top down. Zebra stripes, this is what one of the many cool things that Alan Turing figured out, emerge from the bottom up. They emerge from the different speeds of different proteins, activator and inhibitor proteins that disperse at different speed from a point source, and that's what creates the stripes. There's no pre-planning in evolution about how those stripes emerge. Same thing for termite mounds, which are incredible architectural wonders, ant trails, all of these emergent properties that come from the bottom-up actions of individuals who are really in the best position to sense their local environment. So nature's experience suggests that these top-down solutions, we really have to think carefully about that. Yesterday we had a pretty interesting discussion where the consensus seemed to be that there needs to be some kind of centralized control on infrastructure in communities to overcome NIMBYism, and that may well be true, but be careful with that because we know that top-down decisions really only work over the long term if they are at least perceived to benefit the community that is affected and perceived to be designed from the bottom up, and nature does tell us that. So what got me thinking about this assumption about scaling is spending a lot of time on the ground with small-scale farmers, as bottom-up as it gets, in a very, very complex ecological and social system. This is right in the heart of India, in a region where there are a lot of small-scale farmers. And there are millions, we all know this, millions and millions of small-scale farmers in this world. And with our big ag paradigm, really have to do some thinking about the livelihoods and well-being of these small-scale farmers. So in this particular region, with all good intentions of the Green Revolution, intentions to intensify agriculture, increase yields, all of this, from a bottom-up point of view, has led to what Josh might call the low road. Loss of cultural traditions, hollowed-out rural communities, impoverished diets, extreme vulnerability to climate change. The heat waves that are going on are quite scary in this part of the world. And this is where this idea of scaling high-yielding rice and wheat, but mostly rice in this landscape, into places where there isn't enough water, there isn't the energy for irrigation or the infrastructure for irrigation, and farmers are too poor to afford the inputs, has displaced traditional varieties of cereals and upended previously healthy diets. And I really try to keep my romanticism outside of this, but I have to conclude that this really was inappropriate scaling. And it's not that these traditional varieties and different species of crops and cereals are better because they're traditional. There's nothing inherently better about being traditional, but they are better because they are adapted to the local conditions, they can withstand droughts, even though they have lower yields, and they provide better, much needed, better nutrition. So now, fast forward several decades, and if you follow what's happening in India, there is a major push, major top-down push from the highest levels, from the prime minister himself, to revive these traditional cereals, these millets. But this Green Revolution system is so entrenched, the infrastructure is so based around the rice-wheat system that it's really a very tall order to have this revival be successful. So here are some of these farmers. We've done thousands of surveys with these farmers, and these are not farmers like Don Bruno that Rachel told us about. Don Bruno would like to go to the city, but he can't sell his land. That's what you told us, Rachel, right? these are really small-scale farmers, like less than a hectare kind of small-scale farmers. And their livelihoods are so climate vulnerable, so precarious, that they have no choice but to go to the cities on the off-season, the non-growing season, to earn some money, not much, but some money from back-breaking labor, breathing dust, working in construction sites, carrying bricks on their head, working in factories with God knows what hazardous chemicals. It's really not a pleasant experience. So if you talk to these people, you will hear from many that they would prefer to stay with their families, but there really is not much choice for them. So that's a different side of the story. I know there are many reasons to defend the Green Revolution. Jesse, Ken, many of these rooms very eloquently can defend the Green Revolution, and it is very defensible for eliminating famines, increasing yields, turning a country from a food importing to a food exporting country. But in some places, this scalability assumption went too far. If it's good in one place, it must be good in another place. And it has done real damage to the genetic resource, which is so important. The genetic resource, which keeps options for the future, for breeding new crops, for having climate resilience, for all the reasons why genetic diversity is so important. So maybe these resources will be recovered, but it's a long road. So this, what I'm showing you at the bottom there, is an effort that we have underway for a roundtable that brings together the stakeholders involved in this millet revival in this particular location, very local, really awesome place. It's also one of the amazing tiger conservation. Miriam has been there. Yes. So the point of this roundtable is to be like a meeting point between this top-down goal for this millet revival, very high-level goal, and this bottom-up reality for what it really takes on the ground to achieve creation of markets, increasing yields, improving farmer practices, improving seed quality, all these kinds of things, what it actually takes on the ground. And someone sitting in Delhi is really not going to know all the details of what it takes on the ground because every place has its own issues about what it takes on the ground. So you might say, maybe I like to think, maybe I'm deluding myself, that this roundtable exercise is really trying to create the high road. Where's Josh? Really trying to create the high road. We're trying to find the leverage points in this complex system that can move forward with this millet revival. So I don't guess that Donella Meadows of Limits to Growth fame is very popular in this room, right? But I really get a lot out of her depiction of these leverage points. I find it clarifying. I've used it with students, and they just find it very a way to organize their thinking. So what Donella Meadows is doing here is showing the trade-off between the low end of how you can have leverage points in a complex system, taxes, subsidies, these kinds of tinkering kinds of things that might be possible to achieve, although not always politically possible to achieve, but might be possible to achieve, but have limited impact, as opposed to the high end of this scale of leverage points, which is about paradigm changes. Paradigm changes that are very hard to achieve. We talked about the blue tomatoes maybe helping with the paradigm change for people to accept GMOs yesterday, if you were in that session. So these paradigm changes are hard to achieve, but can have enormous impact. And as Donella Meadows describes it, the highest leverage point is to transcend paradigms. Quote, to keep oneself unattached in the, to keep oneself unattached in the arena of paradigms, to stay flexible, to realize that no paradigm is true, that everyone, including the one that sweetly shapes our own worldview, is a tremendously limited understanding of an immense and amazing universe that is far beyond human comprehension. So I would argue the same about our paradigm about scaling, that we need to be flexible, we need to challenge our own sweetly held world views. So here's another artist, the same artist, his rendition of a different painting. Same idea, that it's made of interacting parts. But I like this one better than the bowl. I like this one better because all the pieces do not fit neatly together. They don't make one cohesive bowl. There is no magical scalable solution to construct a system from its individual parts in this sky blue painting. So what emerges from the pieces is a mosaic. Different solutions for different places, for different situations, for different times, for different communities. So over the years, my comfort zone has shifted from this kind of elusive quest for scalable solutions to feed the world, to power the world, to make the world more equitable, to fix the problems in the world. The world's just too complex. And I've taken the road of more systems gardening, working on the building blocks rather than the building, bringing a brick, not a blueprint. So as eco-modernism evolves over the coming years, I'm going to pin its success less on quote, scalable, global, efficient solutions that might make a lot of rational sense, and more on ways to fine-tune solutions that work for people, for nature, in many different places, in many different ways. So it's really sad that this is the last time we will be together in this room, and I hope it's not the last time we are communicating with each other. But I would just like to end again with gratitude and thanks to BTI for this really remarkable experience over these years. Thank you.